my final project, I decided to look at Celtic myths that we read in class, specifically Cuchulainn, the children of Lear, Finn McCool, and Deirdre, and I wanted to understand the role in the Celtic revival. The medium I decided to portray is as a drawing. The reason I wanted to do this as like an art form was because art and literature have the same type of power in the way that they can retell history and show people's thinkings and ideas at that specific time. Art and literature are also similar in the way that they can influence a large group of people, and the Celtic revival is a great example of that. The Celtic revival is a great example of how influential art can be to a group of people. A quote I found that really explains what this Celtic revival was. It says, "The revival sought to actively resuscitate and even reinvent its ancient traditions." And the way that literature had revived these ancient traditions one way that they did it was through retelling myths. And the reason why myths were so great at retelling and bringing back these ancient Celtic values and traditions was because Irish myths and legend occupy a certain threshold where history and imagination are mutually continued. So what I get from this is that there's a lot of like mysticism and in the myths, like there's giants and sorcerers and prophecies, but there's also that history like I talked about before. It's able to show how those people before they were colonized felt and what their values were and what their culture was. So first I'll talk about Cuchulainn, and basically the story behind Cuchulainn is that he is a demigod in Irish mythology who got his nickname after killing Cuchulainn's guard dog in self-defense, and he offered to take the dog's place. He is portrayed in many stories as being courageous and a righteous warrior. In the end, when he became mortally wounded, he tied himself upright to a stone so he could die standing up and facing his enemies. So the two images I decided to portray in these first two panels were one of him in battle, because he was known as such an amazing warrior, and then also his death scene, because I think him choosing to die standing up is a very good representation of his character. As artists and writers retold his story to the people of Ireland, his masculinity and strength and determination quickly made him a hero and mascot for Ireland. He became very well known, very well looked up to, and adored. The next myth I'm going to talk about is the children of Lear, and the story goes 4 children were turned into swans by their evil stepmother. They were destined to be swans for 900 years. They were able to keep their voice and remain together, though, which is able to show their strong depiction of their value of family and loyalty. Family has always been an extremely important thing for the Irish people, but it became even stronger with the revival and retelling of the stories. This myth also mentions Catholicism, which is depicted in the 4th panel. This is their death scene. The Christian monk is baptizing them right before they died, and they are finally able to be laid to rest and rejoin their family. Again, the mention of Catholicism shows how important it was to the people of Ireland at this time and still today. The next myth I decided to portray is Finn McCool, and he is a giant-like man, and he has similar characteristics and reputation to Cuchulainn. What makes him different, though, is he is known to make the geographical features like Isle of Man. There are many stories of Finn, but I decided to represent his kind of start and end. So in panel 5, I drew the Fish of Knowledge because he had spent many years trying to capture it, and he changed fairly drastically after that. In regards to his death, there are many different versions of it, but I'm deciding to depict the one where he didn't actually die, but instead went to sleep, ready to be awakened for when Ireland was in time of need. And I think this was really interesting because it kind of metaphorically came. There was a long period of time while Ireland was under colonization where Finn McCool and his story was not told, but then when Ireland had gone through their Celtic revival and re-embraced all of their Celtic history, Finn McCool was brought back, and he did help with the Celtic revival, and therefore help Ireland. So the last myth I'm talking about is Deirdre, and this is a myth where a woman was prophesied to be the most beautiful woman in Ireland, but she would cause the death of many men. So because of this, the king decided to raise her in hiding and marry her later in life. However, she had found someone that she had fell in love with and wanted to be with forever. But tragically, they had ended up dying in separate deaths. But when they were buried, the trees surrounding them had grown together and wrapped themselves around each other, allowing them to be united with each other eternally. And this is a very well-known myth and story in Ireland, but I also chose it because I think the trees kind of metaphorically relate to Ireland and their Celtic past, and how it will always be with them. I think what's most important about what I'm trying to say is the kind of post-colonial theory of how the Irish people had gone back to a time to before they were colonized, re-embrace those traditions and that culture. And they were able to do that because of these myths, because these myths explained all of their values that they had, all their traditions and their culture. So thank you for listening to my presentation.